This is Karen from newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. You know, that maze that we go through every single day of our life. We think we know the right path and we're walking down it, and all of a sudden there's a wall in front of us, and we have to make a choice: go right, left, or turn around and go back. So you're not alone if those are the things that you are experiencing in life. My guest today is Jeremy Cline, who I met through Podmatch. And Jeremy, I listened a little bit to your podcast, and it sounds like we talk about very similar things that, it's never too late to make a change. So give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, probably up until 6, 7 years ago, something like that, I was always doing what I felt I should do rather necessarily than what I really wanted to. So I'm a lawyer by background. In fact, as we record this in the middle of September, I'm almost exactly 20 years qualified. And I'm still practicing, but it was probably 6 or 7 years ago that the feelings of, do I really want to be doing this with my life, started to creep in. And it's really since then that I started my journey of transition, and I'm very much still in transition. I kind of leave this sort of Batman Bruce Wayne double life at the moment, where on the one hand I'm still practicing as a lawyer, still doing that, whilst on the other hand I've got, as you mentioned, a podcast all about careers and career change and enjoying working life. And for the past 18 months, I'm also been coaching. So I'm a coach helping people with career transitions, work transitions, life transitions.
Well, it's interesting because I know as a young child, I always thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I swore up and down that's what I was going to end up doing. And by the time I got to college, that all changed. My parents had told me for many years, we'll let you go to college. When you go to college, you'll become a teacher. When you become a teacher, you'll be able to start a life, and you'll find your husband, you'll have your kids, and you'll have the white picket fence. But when I started college, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted something different. And actually, I'm doing it now. I wanted to be in some form of broadcasting. I wanted to reach out and touch other people and have them touch me in return. And so, what you're talking about makes so much sense to me, because we start out our lives doing what we think we have to do because either someone told us that, or it was an interest of ours along the way. And now we're going to do that from 9 to 5. And I know as an attorney, that probably was much longer days for you as well.
Certainly can be, yeah.
And people ask today, why is it that we become almost so disengaged from the things that we thought were going to make us happy? Can you explain how that happened for you?
How did I become disengaged from the things that made me happy? That's a really interesting question. And I don't think in my professional life, at least for a very long part of it, that I ever really gave that much thought. I think it was like drilled into me that, I'm not going to say drilled into me, but it was kind of like the assumption was that work is work and you make your happy memories elsewhere. And if you're lucky, maybe you do something that you love. But for the most part, people do the job because it's the job. It's what's expected of you. It pays the bills. And that's just something which has been perpetuated, I think, for quite a long time. And it's really only now in the past maybe 3 or 4 years that we've started to see people start to question that, start to change that. I think one of the reasons is just the opportunities that are available now. I mean, we're now recording a podcast interview, which we probably wouldn't have known how to do maybe
Right.
10 years ago. So yeah, in my case, I'm not going to say that every aspect of being a lawyer is bad. There's definitely bits to it that I enjoy. And what I'm now looking to do is kind of take those bits but translate it into something else where I enjoy much more of what I'm doing, rather than what just seems like an increasingly small percentage.
It's interesting. You're not the first attorney that I've talked to in the past year they're all going through some sort of transition. And it seems to be right around that 20-year mark. Um, they've been putting all their time and energy into something. And I know, for instance, my oldest son is an attorney, and he told me just a couple weeks ago, I need more time for myself. And he says, I've been so devoted to my career that I go on vacation, but I take my work with me. So I'm really not on vacation. And he too is now thinking about transitioning into something, and it still is in law, which is interesting, but he wants to transition to something that maybe has a little bit more meaning to him at this time of his life. The sad part is those of us around professionals, we're sort of envious. Like, God, you went to law school and you have a law practice, and look what you've been doing, and now you want to give it up. So how do we get our peers around us and our family to accept the fact that, hey, I'm human, I need a change?
What somebody else thinks is none of your business.
Love that.
By which I mean, it's not your job to get people to accept that you're going through a change. You can, if they're interested, sit down with them, explain your thought process, explain your why. They might understand, they might not understand, but ultimately what other people think is kind of irrelevant. Now, that's not to say that you might not welcome and benefit from support, especially nearest and dearest. I mean, if I'd turned around to my wife and said, I'm quitting as a lawyer, and she'd said, no, you're not, you're going to carry on, and you're going to carry on working those hours and carry on providing for the life that I've become accustomed to, that's a different conversation. That might call into question relationships and that sort of thing. But for the most part, what other people think really doesn't matter.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly where I was coming from a little over 10 years ago, when I was sort of pushed out of corporate America. Basically was inadvertently told, you're a little bit too old for our culture. And it was hurtful, obviously, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I then looked at, what is it I really, really want to do? And I too had to come home to my family and say, I'm going to go through this transition, and the money I was bringing in, it's not going to be there. It may in the future, but it's not going to be there initially. And it was interesting how loving and understanding my family truly was. It was, if this is going to make you happy, if this is what you need to do, then do it. We'll find a way to get through it together. And we have. So I'm glad you said that, because it's not what other people think, but you're supporting core of family and friends. If they're on your side and supporting you, that is so much easier to make that transition.
And you raise a very interesting point about money, and the number of people that I speak to who kind of think that if you're paid enough, or if you're going to carry on doing it and you get paid more, that's okay. And that even if it's not particularly satisfying, it doesn't fill you up, it doesn't give you joy, that being paid more kind of buys you off for that. And I mean, I'm seeing this like recently and regularly, and it almost becomes part of company culture, where profits were down, weren't able to pay bonuses as well as we were last year. Let's focus on growing the pot, growing bonuses, because that way we'll retain people. And some people buy into that. Some people think that the reason they want to stay is for this prospect of getting paid more. I'm not saying it's not the case with everyone, but once people really sit down and think about it and start to get to know themselves, do the work, they realize that no amount of pay is going to make them happy. And you kind of get to a point where that trade-off just doesn't work.
You know, at this corporate job, every Friday we would have a team meeting, and the manager would go around the room. One week it's, what's your favorite music? What's your favorite book? Whatever. And I found after about 2 or 3 months, I couldn't give them an answer. I didn't know anymore because I was so into coming to work, doing everything that I had to do, that when I went home, I wasn't doing the things that I enjoyed, wasn't even eating the foods that I enjoyed. And that's when it sort of hit me. You know what? There's a reason why this manager does this. She wants us to have a life besides the job. And when I finally was pushed out the door, she called me and she said, I can talk to you about this now. She said, you were burned out, so burned out. She said that you couldn't even tell me what your favorite flower was, what your favorite song was. And then she said, can you do that now? And I could, because I was away from all those things that were holding me down. So as a coach, how do you begin by helping your clients? You know, some coaches will provide exercises to figure out what it is you want. Some, it's all through dialogue. What is your approach?
The first stage for me is you are here. So you go into one of those enormous shopping malls that you have in the US, and it's unfamiliar to you, and it's got 5 floors and it's got 300 stores, and you've never been there before. What's the first thing you do? You go to the bottom of the escalators and you find the map and you look for the little red dot that says you are here. So my process is that, essentially. It's the self-knowledge, it's the you are here. And the things that I look to tease out initially, and it is usually through exercises that I've found to work particularly well in the past, if they chime with the person that I'm coaching, there'll be exercises to bring out principally strengths, weaknesses, values, and the stuff that you've enjoyed doing in the past, which again goes to values. That sort of stuff, when people do the work, is quite revelatory, especially the values piece, where you dig into the things that really drive you, the things that are really important to you. When I got coached myself, doing the values work was probably the moment when the clouds parted and I kind of looked at my top values and went, oh, wow, that explains a lot. Because before I got coaching, I'd actually started a business in the podcast space, sort of podcast transcriptions. I had a process for producing my own, which I realized could scale. I mean, it needed to scale quite a lot in order to make it a business idea, but I could see it work. And I think it was, in fact, I still think that it is quite a good idea. But when I started doing it, it was making me happy. It was, I wasn't enjoying it very much, and so, but I couldn't figure out why. So I stopped doing it. And then when I did the values work, I realized that the top things that are most important to me are things like community, collaboration. It's having the conversations. It's not kind of plowing through the more mechanistic stuff, which some people may love, but it just wasn't for me.
Right.
And so that really explained why that didn't work, and started to give me some much bigger clues about what would, which ultimately has led me to coaching myself.
Well, one of the things I realized when I started podcasting, it was like I inferred, it was something I always wanted to do. So when I was graduating high school and going on to college, my parents thought I was taking classes to become a teacher. Instead, I took classes in communications. And the college I was going to had an associate's degree. And I was smart enough to know that my parents weren't going to catch on for at least 2 years. So I was going to go for that associate degree. And if I was lucky, I could go on for my bachelor's. When I obtained the associate's degree, I called my parents and I said, I'm really excited. I now have my associate's degree. And my mother said, there's no such thing in education. I said, oh, yeah, well, hate to tell you, it's in broadcasting. And this was 1969. And my parents said to me, there aren't any women really in broadcasting. What do you think you're going to do with your life? And my father said, you're being cut off. You want to pay for your own education? You can do it. He said, but I'm not wasting money on you that you're not going to be able to use. It was a crushing blow. I went to work, and of course, my associate's degree got me volunteer time in the radio stations, but it wasn't giving me what I wanted. And so I sort of like put the dream on hold. And when my youngest son was graduating high school, I looked in the mirror and I said, I need to get my bachelor's. No way is my youngest child going to go to college, get his bachelor's, and mom is going to just be sitting here with her associate's degree. And so I got my bachelor's, I got my master's. And then everyone said, what are you going to do with it? And I knew what the answer was. It's like, I'm going to start podcasting. I'm going to talk to people and learn from others. I'm a lifelong learner. So let me learn from you, and maybe you'll learn something from me. And so I didn't build this career based on how am I going to market it? How am I going to get viewers? How am I going to make money? It was about, I need to finally make myself really happy. And I found that by doing that, my family is happy. My friends are happier. And it makes a whole difference. And I'm sure that's part of what you're finding in as you explore the different things that you want to do now.
One of the things that was really showing up for me as you were talking was this influence that our parents have. And it's kind of an awareness for me that when I've got a young daughter, she's 7, but when she starts thinking about what she does when she leaves school, presumably aged 18, I've really got to bury my preconceptions about what is appropriate, because, you know, in most cases, our parents love us, they want us to do well, but what worked for them doesn't necessarily work for us now. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, is your daughter likely to go to university? I would have said, yes, absolutely. Now I'm kind of thinking, I'll be delighted if she wants to go, provided she goes in with her eyes open about what it means and what it costs and what it could do for her. But it's not like something I see it as a necessity. A chap I interviewed recently, we had this conversation during the interview, and he was saying that he would rather employ someone aged 18 and give them a 2-year apprenticeship rather than employ a graduate, because in those 2 years, that apprentice will learn so much more practical information than they will from a 3-year degree. And just the way people earn money changes. It's different these days, and we touched on this before. You don't need a degree to start a podcast. You don't need a degree to start a YouTube channel. You don't need a degree for many, many things. And just following a professional career, it's not the only way to do things. And that's before we even get talking about AI and what the impact that might be. So, yeah. And the other thing was there's kind of what your parents say and what they do. And one thing I was consciously aware of was that my mum, I mean, she was a stay-at-home mum for quite a long time. Then as my brother and I got older, she started a bookkeeping qualification and ended up training and qualifying as an accountant, which was brilliant. She worked unbelievably hard for it. But then a few years later, she would almost like sing to herself, I don't want to go to work, because she was kind of miserable in her job. And yet she was kind of like, oh, you know, you should get this job. It's a good job, that kind of thing. And I was looking at her and thinking, yeah, but you're not particularly enjoying it. And she'd kind of resigned herself to, oh, well, you know, this is it. She'd kind of like phoned it in. I'll make the memories when I retire. And, you know, without putting too much of a downer on it, she never got there. She died of cancer age 57, so never got to retire. And that was probably an early wake-up call to me. It still took me quite a few years before I started really beginning to make changes myself, but that was an enormous wake-up call.
You know, there's usually some sort of life-changing moment that makes us do the things that we do. We may not recognize it at the time. And I know my life-changing moment, like I said, was my son going to college and realizing that the job that I had, I loved what I did, but I hated the culture. And so, because I loved what I did, I went to work early, I stayed late. But as time went on, I realized that that's just not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. There was another way of doing what I liked without that horrible culture around me. And I've seen both my sons go through this as well. My oldest son was working for a firm in New York, and he loved the work he was doing, but the culture of that huge firm in New York was killing him. And after 10 years there, he had to pick up and leave. And he got in with another firm, and he's been fairly happy there. But at this point again of his life, you know, he's in his late 40s, and he's going, you know what, there's more to this than just the paycheck. And everyone tells him he's good at what he does. He said, and he knows he is, but that's not the fulfilling part. And that's why I do this podcast. I want people to understand that you don't have to have a big bundle in the bank to make these changes. You may have to stick with that job that maybe you don't like initially, but start making those changes. And if you believe enough in yourself, others are going to start to believe in you as well.
That's so true. And I'm actually quite optimistic that employers might eventually tag on to this and catch up. There's much more being talked about purpose-driven workplaces and what workplaces can do to increase employee engagement, wellness, mental well-being, all that sort of stuff. It's so early days, but and it doesn't detract from everyone being responsible for their own personal happiness. But I am quite optimistic on the basis of what I've been hearing so far, possibly in my own echo chamber, that companies are starting to realize that people do want a purpose. They want a recognizable culture. They want values that are lived and don't just live on the wall. So yeah, I'm kind of hopeful that people will do that. But yeah, you're quite right. Sometimes you can't just jump out of the plane and hope that the parachute's going to get you to the ground safely. Sometimes it does need to be more of a transition. I look at in my case, I mean, from the date that I first had the conversation with my wife about me wanting to basically quit my job and do something else, it's been a 5-year journey so far. Occasionally I find myself looking back at myself and thinking, crikey, what on earth's taken me so long? But I've done kind of what's felt so far comfortably uncomfortable, if you see what I mean.
Mhm.
So maintaining the bits that I feel like I need to, the comfort level I need to kind of take the pressure off myself, so that I don't drive myself absolutely potty with having to make this work. But then also just keep on moving forward, keep on exploring myself. And I know that eventually I'll get there.
Earlier today, I was a guest on a podcast, and we were talking about the fact that most of my coaching, I prefer working with individuals who are like 45, 50 and up. And the reason I do is because that's just about the time of our lives that we start wondering, what else is there? Is this all I'm destined to do? And I have to say, I'm extremely proud that I saw my husband go through this transition, because he quit college 4 credits short of graduation. He was offered a job back in the early 70s. It was exciting, it was money, and the degree he was getting had nothing to do with the job. And he said, okay, I'm done, and went to work. And he loved a lot of the things that he was doing. But just about the same time I went back to school, he chose to do the same thing. But prior to that, he worked for a company that was once a very small company by the name of Microsoft. So he was with them in the early days, and he gained so much knowledge while he was working there that he transitioned into becoming a contractor and doing IT work for companies large and small here in the Cleveland area. And then one day he woke up and he said, no, I'm going to go back to school and finish my degree. And he did. And here he is at age 73. He's working in the IT field. He's got a degree in higher ed. And so he does support some clients along the way. But he's the happiest he's ever been, because he completed the degree that he really wanted to have. He extended it beyond that, which he never thought he ever would. And that he's really able and capable of getting up in the morning and going and working a full-time job. In this podcast we were doing earlier today, the question was, well, why should people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s still be working? And my comment is, if this is something you want to do, age should not be the issue. You can start a podcast at any age. You can get your coaching credentials at any age. You can pick up a paintbrush at any age. There's so many things we can do.
And it could even be your original career. I've known lawyers who are still working well into their 70s and 80s. I mean, I've got a colleague who, I can't remember which side of 80 he's on, but he's pretty close. He is working 5 days a week, and it's his hobby. He loves it. He absolutely lives for this work. And, part of me thinks, oh God, I never want to be that person who doesn't retire. But then I catch myself, well, hang on a minute. He's loving it. I mean, he's probably, it's that cliched phrase, love what you do and you never work another day in your life. I mean, he probably doesn't know what he would do. And so, what I'm a very new green coach, but I can see how this is something that I could enjoy doing and just want to carry on doing it and carry on doing it for as long as I'm able. And
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, because I'd like my listeners to check it out. And what do you talk about?
yeah, so the podcast is called Change Work Life, and you'll find it at changeworklife.com. And it really is aimed at someone who they're just feeling like they're not getting everything they could out of working life, but they're not sure what needs to change or how to go about it. And really, we cover a pretty broad range of subjects around that topic. I mean, my guests tend to be either people who have made big career transitions themselves. I mean, one of my favorite is the accountant who, having built up her own practice, then sold out, quit, and is now a canine behavioralist. There's another guy who was in IT until he was 50 something, got made redundant. He's a hypnotherapist, absolutely loves it. And so, I find out their stories and the motivations and the roadblocks, limiting beliefs, opinions of family, friends, that kind of thing. And then the other guests tend to be the experts, the coaches. We talk about a particular topic, which could be very macro, sort of, I'm unhappy, I've been doing this for 20 years, what on earth could I do differently? I don't even know where to start, to the more tactical things. I've got interviews about how to write a CV, how to perform well at interviews. As COVID was starting, I did an interview where we've got 20 something tips about how to perform well in a video interview, which was quite relevant at the time. And then things like well-being, stopping burnout. I've got an episode which I did recently all about tech tools. We've got so much technology at our disposal, and it's very easy to get distracted by the next shiny things. How do you figure out which is the right tool for you? But the underlying theme is, it's just, what are the changes, big or small, that I can make now, and what are the changes, big or small, which I might want to make in the future, just to enjoy a happier working life, a happier life in general.
I love it, because I learned a long time ago, and it was a Christmas day, and it was just my husband and son here at home with me. But all my friends seemed to be having all these wonderful family things going on. And about midday, just feeling so sorry for myself that it was just the three of us, I posted something on Facebook, and my older brother, who lives in California, read it. He called me. He said, take that off of Facebook right now. Nobody's going to make you happy except yourself. He said, tell me one thing that would make you happy right now. So I said, well, if the whole family was together. He said, stop it. I'm on the West Coast. Our other brother's on the East Coast. Your mother is, 5 hours north of you. We're not all going to be together on the holiday. Tell me one other thing that would make you happy. And I said, spending time with my husband and son. He said, so where are they? I said, well, your nephew's in his bedroom playing video games because he got them for Christmas. Where's your husband? He's sitting in front of the TV sleeping. He said, then do me a favor. Go knock on the door and ask your son to come out. Then the two of you go downstairs and you wake up your husband. But don't do it without a plan. What can the three of you do together? And I'll tell you, that just changed my whole world. It was like, wow. I let them go their separate ways because I thought that was making them happy. But then I became miserable. And so I thought of a few things that we could do. One of our favorite things is to play Uno. So I took the Uno deck. We went and woke up my husband. He said, just give me 5 minutes. We gave him the 5 minutes. We sat around the table and played Uno for about 4 hours. That was the nicest present I ever got. But I made myself happy by saying, hey, this is what I can do. So that's what you're sort of telling your clients that you're coaching. You've got to find that one thing that can make you happy.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you do. I am really intrigued. What would have happened though if your son had gone, "Oh, Mum, I don't want to play, I want to play with my video games." Your husband had gone, "Oh, come on, look, I just want to watch TV." I'm curious as to what you might have done
So
then to kind
it's
of.
funny because my son came down kicking and screaming. Okay. He did not want to do this. And he was a young adult. Okay. It was like, but I finally said, one of these days you're going to move out. Can we just have a memory for today? And it finally was, yeah, I guess so. And then my husband, he was sleeping only because he didn't know what else to do. So he was willing. And when we started playing, we started talking about bigger family games that we've played with my mother, with my brothers, with my nieces and nephews. And I think that's what really brought us together in that game. And then it went on so long because every once in a while, my son would play the way his grandmother did. And my mother did not know she was cheating when she played, but she cheated. And we would all laugh about it and let her. So one hand, he played like his grandmother. The next game, he played strategically. And it made it just so much fun. And that was the first Christmas that we finally said, we're going to keep doing something different every year. And sometimes we went to the movie theater. Sometimes it was watching something on TV. Other times it was taking out family photo albums and talking about family members. So thanks to my brother, I realized I can sit in my room and be miserable and post something on Facebook. Where's that going to get me? And he was right. I had to take that step forward.
And it's about creating the opportunities, isn't it? And sometimes those opportunities that you've created for yourself, they won't come off. So, maybe your son would not have been persuaded to come down. And maybe your husband would have said, yeah, okay, well, I've stopped sleeping now, but there's this film I really want to watch on TV. And okay, that happens. Or maybe you do something and there's something, it's just not right. No, this isn't what I need. This isn't what I need now. And in both cases, that's okay. You experiment. I don't think we give ourselves enough grace to try things, to experiment, to allow ourselves to get things wrong. I mean, goodness me, especially in the workplace. I mean, I'm a practicing lawyer. How much practice do I actually get? No, I've got to get it all right first time. So just giving it, looking out for what the opportunities could be, creating the opportunities, trying them, might work, might not work. And but you'll never know unless you give it a go.
And you hit the key thing. We have to give ourselves some grace. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to say, okay, it didn't work. Doesn't mean nothing's going to work. I'll try a different path the next time. And that's something that I've taken on. And it doesn't mean I'm happy 24/7. And I hope our listeners understand that. I don't think anybody is happy 24/7, but we can get through those downtimes. We can look forward to making changes. And like you said, there are opportunities. We just have to open our eyes.
And take the things from the opportunities which may not have quite worked out in the way you thought they would, but there's still going to be value there which you can take forward. I mean, my podcast, for example, I originally had this idea that it was going to be this thing where I had tens of thousands of downloads every week, and I was going to monetize it with adverts and that kind of thing. This is despite starting from a position of zero, no followers, no influence, no authority, no nothing. And as anyone who's started a podcast in the past few years know, getting tens of downloads is an achievement, let alone tens of thousands. But it's taught me a whole brace of new skills. It's as a networking tool, podcasting is amazing. I mean, we wouldn't be having this fantastic conversation were it not be the fact that we both have podcasts. And it was a guest on my podcast who was my coach. I met her because she popped up and said, "Hey, I'd like to be a guest." And we had a really great conversation. And then when I was in a place where I thought, oh, you know what, I really need some coaching now as to which way to turn, I thought I really got on with her. I'd kind of, I'd already done the work. I'd already like vetted her. And yeah, and now I'm getting clients through the podcast for my coaching business. So yeah, maybe it didn't work out quite the way I expected it to, but it sure created opportunities.
Well, I am so glad. I'm glad we got to meet through Podmatch and that you've been a guest on my show. All the information, how individuals can reach you, will be in the show notes. So there's no excuse to anybody to say, hey, Jeremy, that was a great podcast, but how do I reach you? Just go to the show notes and it'll be there. And if you miss out on that, you can always email us at New Cleveland Radio and we will get you Jeremy's information. So I want to thank you for a wonderful conversation today and continued good work.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen.
Thank you, Jeremy. Bye-bye now.